Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar entitled Driving Down Leakage, Combining Data for Better Outcomes. I'm going to wait a minute or two just to make sure that everyone gets a chance to join. I can see people joining, the numbers jumping up as I speak, so we'll give that a minute just to make sure that people don't miss the start of it. Okay, I think if we kick off now, we've got quite a busy agenda. So, as I said, very warm welcome to you. This is the agenda that we're planning to follow in this webinar. So I hope it's going to provide a good understanding of the challenges and the ways of looking at using data to tackle them. I'm pretty sure, however, most of you are quite familiar with the webinar topic, or you probably wouldn't be here. So we're going to do introductions and welcome, cover a bit about Watermark, and look at the main body of the webinar, which is the combining the data and some case studies. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So in terms of introductions, I'll introduce myself first. My name's Ruth Clarke and I'm head of digital for the UK and Ireland. I'm a civil engineer by trade, and I've worked for the last 25 years in various technical and commercial roles within a number of different software companies that all provide solutions to the water industry. I'll now hand over to my colleague Matt, who can tell you a little bit about himself. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Ruth. Hi, everyone. My name's Matthew Kennedy. I'm a global product manager with Xylem, and I'm responsible for our digital water loss products. So that includes leakage. I've been with Xylem for about 6 years. I was previously based out in Southeast Asia. I've moved back to the UK a couple of years ago. I was working out around Asia and Australasia for about 10 years prior to that, and today I'd be doing the bulk of the presentation around combining data and leakage. Yep.
Thank you very much. Now, just before we start, I would really like to do a very quick poll. It's always great for us presenting when we can't see anybody to get an understanding of who's in the audience. So if we could run that poll, and if you could answer that, we'll just have a quick look at how the split is. Not sure if it's come up. We're running a new platform this time, so there might be a few teething troubles. So if that's not working, yeah, I might.
It's live. Sorry, Ruth. Maybe you can't see it, you and Matt, but it is live.
Oh, well, I still won't know who's in the audience. So.
Sorry,
but never mind.
So we've got 57% water utility, 17% supply chain, 10% consulting engineer, 3% contractor, and 13% saying other.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura, for that. Okay, after that success, I will just very quickly give a little bit of background. So first of all, who is Xylem? What do we do, and what makes us qualified to talk about leakage? Well, we're a fairly large company that has a very long history of providing solutions across the water industry, as well as helping the sort of water challenges related to commercial and industrial endeavours. Many people might know us for providing pumps. We do that. We provide valves and controls along with various treatment solutions for both clean and wastewater treatment. And we also provide instrumentation and comms needed to understand how assets are working and to measure water quality and all of that kind of stuff. So on top of that, we also provide digital solutions that can help our customers operate more efficiently. And one of the areas in which we provide these solutions is that of leakage. So the workforce of Xylem is made up of a myriad disciplines, from civil, mechanical, electrical, chemical engineers, to scientists, to geographers, and lots more in between. And with over 20,000 employees, we do have a very strong knowledge base with lots of experience gained on working on projects around the globe. And hopefully today we will showcase some of that knowledge to you in the audience. Before we delve more deeper into leakage, I just want to talk very, very briefly about Xylem's corporate social responsibility programme, Watermark. It basically exists to provide education and equitable access to safe water and sanitation. The reason I'm highlighting it here is that we launched an initiative earlier this year in which Xylem will donate money to a selection of charities for each person who pledges some of their time to do activities such as saving water or litter picking. There are a range of activities that you can choose from. And you can pledge if you use a QR code, if I can, which is shown there. So one of the charities that we'll be supporting is Aquabox, and this charity provides boxes for civilians who are caught up in disaster zones. So the boxes contain items such as blankets, tents, and also small water filters. So if the QR code doesn't work and you would like to get involved, then feel free to get in contact with me after the event and I can send you a link to that. So what we're going to be talking about today involves what we call a Xylem View platform. And that's a platform that Xylem have partnered with Idrica on to provide our digital solutions. The platform was initially born out of the utility Global Omnium, who are based in Valencia, Spain, and they operate globally, and you'll hear a little bit more about them later on when we start to look at some case studies. The platform itself is a vendor agnostic one and aims to bring disparate data sources together in a unified platform, so providing wider access to the data and driving forward operational efficiencies. So the aim of the platform really is to provide more value from the data that you may already have, providing deeper insights by combining and visualizing that data differently. And this slide basically provides a view into where the platform has been deployed globally. Not only focused on leakage, but lots of other challenges faced by water companies are undertaken. So from treatment optimization, reduction in pollution incidents, all the way through to sort of reducing energy and greenhouse gas emissions. Just to add a few more numbers to that, to give you an idea of the scale, the platform's been used to support the operation of 1,200 water systems. And it has ingested data from more than 14 million data points. So I think it's fair to say that it's pretty scalable. I am shortly going to hand over to Matt to talk us through the subject matter, but I'd like to run that second poll, and then Laura, if you could tell me when it comes up, etc. Just to get a bit of understanding before we start about the biggest challenges that you have relating to leakage. It would be really useful and interesting to know. Once Laura can provide us with that information, then I will hand over to Matt and he can take away the main part of the webinar. So I will stop sharing now.
So the poll is live now. If everybody can choose their answer for what is the biggest challenge you have relating to leakage at present. So currently 41% of people say speed of find and fix, which has just gone up to 45. 15% for ability to prioritise leaks, 10% for reducing the number or complexity of applications required, and 26% is other. Speed of fix and find has gone up to 48% now, so taking the majority.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Interesting, perhaps not surprising. Right, just to check, we can see the slide okay before I start.
Yes.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, so hi everyone. Now I shall go through for the next 30 minutes or so about data in leakage. So first we'll start with a bit of a problem statement. Where to start? What is the problem? Well, problem is leakage. Leakage is the problem. Also, we need to keep reducing it. We've got a target of about 13% in the UK as an industry over the next 5 years, which is going to need some £500 million of investment. And according to our regulator, better use of smart technologies and data. I know this isn't too different anywhere else in the world as well. Also, leakage is really hard to find. Also, it requires a different approach for every utility, DMA, and so on. Also, it's November, and for our international audience, that means it's the start of leakage season. And here in the UK, our pipes burst when it gets cold, and it's just gotten cold. Also, it never ends. Also, everybody keeps talking about digital and IoT all the time, and we don't really know what it does. Also, I could list about 100 things here and just run the webinar as a therapy session. But no, today I'll discuss for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so about data in leakage. And when you bring it all together, you can get some really great outcomes. What data works for which use cases, why that works, and what are the impacts. So what sort of data are we talking about? There's a lot. To those of you familiar with leakage, you'll know that there's no single approach or solution that's going to work everywhere. Not between utilities, not within utilities. One DMA or zone will be different to another. We've got lots of great point solutions that continually improve the analysis of that specific solution. For example, in acoustics, we've progressed from logging to fixed networks to pattern matching of sounds and potential sizing of leaks based on the noise. In metering, we've moved from dumb meters to smart meters, and then maybe adding other data types being recorded by those meters. And elsewhere, we're talking about finding leaks from space with satellites. It's amazing. But as a result, we're ending up with loads of different data types, often with several vendors providing each data with different areas of geographical or temporal coverage. Some data we buy specifically to tell us where the leaks are or how big they are. Others we hold for a different purpose in the business, but might have some relevance to leakage. It's vast, it's messy. And as an industry, we try to sense what's going on in the pipe. So this blue segment on the chart on the screen, top right, flow, pressure, and so on. We try to infer what's going on in the pipe through remote sensing, like the navy segment on the left-hand side, maybe like satellite monitoring or a customer calling up about discoloration from their tap. We try to remember where the assets were using our GIS systems and asset information. So that's the sky blue segment at the top. And then sometimes we might just throw in a bunch of other relevant data into the mix, like traffic information, maybe feedback from work orders, weather, proximity of trees I've seen recently. And then based on our knowledge, skills, or mood, we mix it all together and get a really difficult Monday morning for a leakage analyst. Try accessing all of that data with 3 different methods of 2-factor authentication across 4 systems and a laptop with PMAC in a cupboard that somebody turned off for the weekend. Wouldn't it be nice just to have somewhere that took everything into account and gave you a list of things to do? As an industry, we've made some steps towards combining some of this data. There are use cases out there. We might typically look at flow and pressure together, or perhaps system input volume and customer metering to derive a more accurate water balance. We might go as far to do a really complicated multi-parameter analysis to assess the likelihood of failure of our pipes, only to put it on a shelf and forget it existed when the time comes to prioritize where to sweep for leaks. You know, we're actually quite good as a group at bringing all the data together for these types of one-time analysis. But how do we speed that up and leverage that insight on a day-to-day basis for our operation teams? So we're not looking at the past and we're starting to look at the future. So how do we begin to bring this all together? And why do I have a picture of cats on the screen? Yes, you're going to need an enterprise strategy for this that fits your organization. And yes, as an industry, we can begin to standardize our protocols to bring that data together, standardize our system architectures, and so on. This will be important. It will make things more efficient in the long run, but it's slow. And you'll know that it's a long and arduous journey getting all these data silos and vendors into one place. It's like herding cats. Just when you've got 2 vendors in one place, One of them changes their API spec, and the other gets kicked off your framework in the next round of procurement. Don't let that deter you, though. You shouldn't wait to merge some of your leakage-related data to get the outcomes. One, because as an industry, we don't have the time. And two, you can get the value of these data integrations regardless of all these difficulties with APIs and data lakes and architecture. And this is where the brief cat analogy stops. Break the problem into pieces, not your cats. Start small, both geographically and conceptually. And indeed, some of you on this call will have already done this with your smart towns or your trial projects, or by sticking to the familiar and combining 2 or 3 different data types of one data in one system. But as well as this, find a tool where you can represent the insights in one place. Not necessarily all the data, but the insights. And don't make it Excel. Make sure it can scale, else you will find you'll never get beyond the trial stage. So, for example, measuring district flow and smart metering. Where any of you have done this, you'll know it helps define a more accurate and more frequently updated water balance. It can more clearly define your real losses and apparent losses, and it can help separate between customer side leakage and network leakage. And that's just 2 data sources, and they're both flow. You'll already know that this requires enormous amounts of effort to ensure the data is validated, it's sent, scanned, stored, studied. What do you then do when you add in pressure, or your acoustic logger fleet, or your customer calls when Mr. Smith calls up to say he's got no water coming out of his tap? Well, we can follow a bit of a conceptual framework here. Often we use an analogy with data that using your data is turning on the lights. So in simple terms, the more data you have, the more lights you have, the better you can see what's going on. But really what we're saying is that once you begin to use these data and you combine them, you can start to follow a process of visualize, analyze, prioritize. And by visualize, I mean get the information to the people doing the job. I doubt many of you listening to this are currently employed to find and fix leaks in the field, because if you were, you'd probably be out there doing it right now. But if you were, you wouldn't appreciate, wouldn't you appreciate knowing that you weren't being sent to find a tiny little leak on a plastic pipe in sandy soils when a much bigger one was round the corner? This often doesn't require complex algorithms or analysis, just a map with more information on it. And so that's one of the first steps you can do. Anything that gives some context to the difficulty of the job to find leakage or repair it. You can then visualize as well the performance of that at the business level, your BI dashboards that can begin to show the updated metrics on the performance of that process. Perhaps the size of the leaks that you're finding per area, the repair type. You can then progress to analyze some of this information. So looking at where you have combinations of alarms that are occurring at the same time. And what can you glean from that information? Well, perhaps you can find out the causality of those events. When one thing happens, another thing is happening. You can also use that data to understand more about the event that's happened. So for example, where you've had an acoustic event, how big is it? How much water have you lost since that alarm has happened? But ultimately, once you can see and analyze that data, you can begin to use it to prioritize. So where is our greatest chance of success in finding leakage today? Which leaks are going to be the easiest or cheapest to repair versus their size or their value that we might get from them? So ultimately, we're looking as an outcome, a reduction in leakage, a reduction in the cost of controlling leakage. There'll be some others. Maybe you've got some ideas. You can put them in the chat if you want, if you have some other thoughts on this. So that's broadly what we're trying to get. But before we start out doing that, let's not forget that we need to measure things. You're going to need a plan to do this before you start. And any of the use cases that we're about to look at have required not just a baseline of performance before the project started, but also a comparable control during the project to ensure that any performance gains that you are seeing are not due to other factors. For example, your leakage might go up during the trial period, particularly during the winter, but without a suitable control, you won't know whether that project area, your trial approach, is outperforming the rest of your network. So now let's look at some examples of some different data combinations. First, and probably most common or familiar to you all, would be the combination of district flow metering and customer metering, which is now increasingly moving to smart metering. By improving your measurement of consumption through the customer metering, you're also going to improve your understanding of the other part of your water balance, your losses. And ultimately, by having this data together with your district metering, you'll reduce leakage by better quantifying it and also improving the awareness of when it is increasing, and therefore targeting the right parts of your network at the right time. By visualizing the problem, you'll become aware of the problem. So, quick example of this is a project that we have run with a utility called Hot Springs in Indiana in the US. They have a population of about 100,000 people, and they had quite a high non-revenue water percentage in the past. So back in 2019, they decided to roll out smart meters and roll out virtual DMAs. So they weren't closing any valves, they were just putting in flow metering for large zones. They set up a handful of these DMAs in the first year and then increasingly added more DMAs as they went on. And that enabled them to enhance their knowledge on where their leakage was in the network and respond more quickly when things were trending up. And that had their teams better targeted and their contractors targeted to the right area. And the result, surprise, surprise, was a reduction in leakage. And that went from around 44% in 2019 to almost half, a 20% reduction by this year. So that's just using two flow measurements. What then if we start to look at flow and pressure, for example? What can we do with pressure? Well, one of the first things that comes to mind is prevention. By measuring it, we can control things through pressure management, and we can use that to reduce leakage. Pressure is also relevant in leakage for our bottom-up analysis by helping us calculate our night-day factors. But there's more. As it becomes more common to measure pressure on smart meters, it becomes possible by comparing with flow through the meter to understand whether a pressure change is related to demand through the meter or something else in the network. So we can start to look at hotspots of pressure cycles or pressure changes and how that might relate to what's going on in the network, which could be leakage. And so this is a common theme across a lot of these combinations. We're not necessarily looking for 100% confidence that something is a leak, but we are looking for an improved confidence of where things are and when they're happening. So even if our business as usual sort of confidence level is 10%, if we improve that to 50%, that's still a 5 times improvement. So by combining this with the measurement of flow, the use case we'll look at now is where pressure zones have been set up. So we've had a customer, the city of Monterrey in Mexico, and they had a day zero problem, much like has been widely published for South Africa. They were going to run out of water, and they decided to establish pressure management across their network over 3,000 or close to 3,000 pressure managed areas. Now that's quite common, and that requires a bunch of hardware to set it up. But they integrated the flow data coming from those zones and the pressure data coming from those zones so that they could dynamically set and adjust the levels for those zones on a more frequent basis than, say, a fixed approach. And ultimately, that meant that they were able to reduce their non-revenue water by 30% and control 40% of their distribution network remotely. That gave them the headroom that they needed to avoid their day zero issue and gave them better control of their water resources. all by combining pressure and flow in one system and being able to control it more closely than they would normally be able to do. So another combination that we'll look at, acoustics and pressure transients. So you might not use pressure transients much in your networks currently, but if you do, they're quite good at detecting when things happen in the moment that it happens. They're good at identifying bursts, particularly on trunk mains, but there are limitations perhaps in terms of perhaps locating where the events are happening, or a degree of confidence over whether that is a burst or an operational event. If you then begin to combine that information with acoustic data at the same point, and more frequently measured acoustic data than your typical daily loggers, you can benefit from both having a good awareness of a burst occurring and a higher confidence that that has happened because of the acoustic data you're receiving, and a better degree of confidence in the location of where that has come from. Now, that's an approach that has been particularly successful for a utility that we have worked with in Malaysia called IS Selangor. They rolled out a system with 2,000 or close to 2,000 of these types of devices, and have used that to detect bursts and leaks over the past 4 years. That's been successful in detecting over 500 leaks as of 2022, and that has contributed to a non-revenue water reduction, along with some of their other schemes, from 33% in 2017 to 27-28% in 2022. It's helped bring their burst rate on their pipes down from 13 per 100 kilometers to 4.3 per 100 kilometers. Quickly moving on to another single or dual combination of data, flow and acoustic loggers. Now, this might be more familiar to those of you in the UK, because acoustic loggers are very common here. If you've got acoustic loggers or acoustic devices, you'll know that there's often a poor correlation between the volume or the sound of the leak that the device is recording and its size. It's not impossible to draw a generalization between the two, and some do, but if you're measuring flow in your network already, you already have that information. You can track the change in flow in your DMAs with the onset of a change in acoustic energy or alarm state in your acoustic logger fleet. And where those two things are occurring at pretty much the same time, there's a pretty high confidence that that acoustic logger is tracking the alarm or the event that's driving your night line change or your leakage event that you're tracking in your DMA flow. And that's what you get when you can combine the two. Now, this is something we did successfully do for Yorkshire Water, where as part of their Smart Water Networks project, they were able to know which alarms from which acoustic loggers were driving their leakage trends. And that resulted in better targeting of leaks and led to some fantastic outcomes in terms of reduction in visible leaks and reduction in leakage in DMAs with acoustic loggers. It led to an increased confidence in the alarms coming from the loggers. You will know if you have a network of fixed acoustic logging, you will get a lot of alarms, and not all of them are clearly a leak or necessarily a leak that's worth targeting. They might be quite small. So it enabled to target the larger leaks first. And it also meant that some tricky long-standing leaks could be backtracked and found on a reanalysis of the data, looking at acoustic and flow data together. So if you're having a winter breakout scenario and you're getting overwhelmed, you might not get everything. There's a lot going on. This means that, say, come spring, when you have more resources, there is information there that means you can go back and find where some of these leaks are. And if I move on to the next slide, here's a quick example of one of those events happening. At the bottom graph, we can see where there has been a large increase in flow within the DMA, and the top graph can show where there's been a large increase in acoustic energy for that same period of time. And where that logger is on the map, without using any acoustic correlation between loggers, which is also common, that gives you a confidence that you go to that logger and you're likely to find the leak or the event that's driving the trend on the flow chart. But things don't stop here. We can also work to integrate more data on top of this. We can also integrate work orders. So once you start matching work orders to your alarms and tracking it, you can start to quantify the value of each work order. You can visualize the time spent against the value achieved. So how much leakage was resolved for that specific work order, for example. And you can start to track the value for the alarms that are driving those work orders. We think we've got a leak in this DMA. Let's assign a team to find it. Let's assign a contractor to fix it. When that gets fixed, was that alarm successful, or was it a dry hole? Or did they repair something that wasn't that big of a leak to start with? So as you'll analyze this data a bit more and dig deeper, you'll be able to see the geographical and seasonal patterns in the effectiveness of your work orders and your find and fix efforts. So this is the feedback loop that will ultimately help you decide where to prioritize your team's efforts. So at Yorkshire Water, that meant that with the combination of acoustic data, flow, and work orders all together, we could track that the cost of repairs per megalitre of water lost went down, because we were targeting points of interest rather than sweeping DMAs. Elsewhere, it might mean something different. You'll be able to spot failed repairs quicker. When the job's done, does the leakage go down? Or you'll be able to know that a repair that you thought was going to stomp your nightline trend back down didn't. So we can dashboard a lot of that information quite well and link up those dashboards with the other alarms from other devices. So there is other data out there. I'm not going to run through use cases of all of the things on the wheel on the original slide. But we are seeing plenty of projects now, and I'm not talking Xylem specifically, but as an industry, where other technologies, satellite information, acoustic or optical fiber projects can also be integrated on top of your other leakage data in one platform. So for example, we have some images here where satellite data for ground displacement can also be combined with pipe risk. So you'll begin to get an idea of where your pipes might be likely to fail before it's happening. And that'll also give you an idea of when leakage does occur, which areas of the network to go investigate. Now, those are case studies that may emerge over the next few years from us or some of you on the call. And we'll be very interested to see the benefits of those types of projects once they're completed. Now, I'm going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to talk through our final use case, which is sort of the everything asterisk use case for Global Omnium. So Ruth, over to you.
Thank you very much. What I did forget to say right at the top of the webinar actually is that there is a Q&A option at the top of the screen, so there have been some questions come in, but do feel free to ask any questions that you may have that you'd like me and Matt to address at the end, rather than me trying to read through them all coming in 2 seconds. So that'll be very useful. So yeah, I mean, I alluded to this at the beginning of the webinar, that I'd be talking a little bit about Global Omnium, and that's the final case study, and I guess it's apt in some ways, because this is really where the beginning of the platform that we've been talking about started, and the solutions that we've that Matt sort of delved into a little bit more have to some extent started their life. So this particular case study I guess, was all about, at the start, was all about the sort of the metering side of things. So if you go back 20 years ago, Global Omnium, as I said, the water utility that runs the water supply for Valencia. And all of their meters, I think about 1 million of them, needed to be read manually, which was very inefficient. So they started to roll out their sort of metering program with AMR and then AMI. And just being able to bring this data in at higher resolution and also, more frequently, allowed Global Omnium to realise a number of benefits. So there's a 30% reduction in non-revenue water, which is made up of both customer side and network leakage. I think the customer side leakage was driven down by sort of 300,000 meters cubed per year, and predominantly I think what they have managed to do is to reduce that network side leakage. There was also, I guess, a sort of slightly unintended, well, maybe not unintended, increase in customer satisfaction. I think having that visibility about their customers' consumption and billing just made them much happier. They also, didn't have to have people trying to get in. In Valencia, a number of the meters are internal, so it's not a case of just popping around and somebody taking a reading. You have to actually enter into the building. So the reason why this is quite an interesting case study, because it does, as well as looking at the leakage side of things that Matt's talked about, it's also used a lot of the other aspects of the platform. So it has, for example, used the water treatment work optimization tools, and that's enabled Global Omnium to reduce their energy usage. And it's also used that sort of that work order side of things to manage maintenance tasks across their asset base. So that's enabled them to reduce the sort of the OPEX costs to the business. So all of the stuff that we do in this platform actually has been, a lot of it has been tested out within Global Omnium's control room and the way that they work. So the strapline by utilities for utilities, that's really where that comes from. So what does this sort of mean? I think if we've got some graphs here, we showed this slide in the last webinar that I hosted, which was related to meter data analytics, and it really just is a visual to show the progression of the smart meter rollout in Valencia from 2006 all the way up to this year, and we can see the increase across that meter estate from sort of dumb meters through to AMR and AMI. But what does that sort of mean in terms of performance? Well, if we look at two separate areas within the estate, if you like, of Global Omnium, you can see here when you look at the smart meters being deployed within those areas, they're in the slightly lighter blue line, and you cross-reference them with the measurement of non-revenue water. You can see that there is that correlation, that trending down of non-revenue water as those meters are being deployed. Okay, so if I can use my mouse. So that basically concludes the webinar. I hope that you found the content informative, both in setting the scene relating to the challenges around leakage. Particularly, I know that we talked a bit about the targets in England and Wales, but as Matt pointed out, reducing leakage is a big challenge, really, wherever you are in the world. It's really, really interesting, Matt, you talking about all the different combinations and what you can gain from that. And I think it's not just about, what do two pieces of data tell you? It's about starting to look at the sheer amount of data points that utilities are now dealing with smart meter rollouts becoming more common in the next 5 years in England and Wales for sure. So I think it's about how do you actually go about sort of making this efficient, automating this so you can get your hands on the information in a timely manner. What I will do now is I shall stop sharing my screen, and we will go to the Q&A session. So please, if any of you do have...
Ruth, just one more. I'm going to do one more slide, some closing remarks, as it were, so I can stand back on my soapbox and say just a few more things. Won't take long. So yeah, just some concluding thoughts really before we hit the Q&A. Based on everything Ruth and I have just presented, for all of you, there's a lot of data out there, but start now. Once you start to add it together, if you do it right, you will see the benefits pretty quickly, and they will begin to stack. So don't wait around for your grand architectures to all get put in place. Start playing around and doing things, because as you can see from the case studies we've got here, and many of the case studies you yourselves will have within your own utilities, it works. When you're able to visualize and analyze this data, you can begin to prioritize and control, and it does reduce leakage. So get your information in the right place and get it to the right people, i.e. your operations teams and your field teams, the people who are actually fixing things. Try to move from that one-time sort of annual planning exercises or water balances to something that's more regularly available, so it's useful to operations. So those are my concluding thoughts. If you had some other thoughts, you can put them in the chat. And yes, back to Ruth if she's going to say some technical information about the Q&A and how to handle it.
Well, I'm not sure I've got any technical information about it, but I can kick it off. So there are a few questions that have come in. If I can sort of curate them, that might be easier than both of us scrabbling through. So first of all, Matt, I've got a question for you. For a utility who does have lots of data available, but in lots of different places, perhaps vendor portals, databases, the work order system, GIS, all of that good stuff. Is there a simple roadmap of where to start and what order to do this in?
A simple roadmap. No, nothing's ever simple in leakage. It very much depends. But I mean, you would go with the flow, and that means you actually start with your flow data, right? But then you might also sort of go with the flow from there, and it depends what you have available and the lowest hanging fruit in terms of data that you have within your utility, how easily you can access it, what your current procurement situation or device situation is, to just add that with the flow data. You might have acoustic loggers, you might not. But the one type of system most utilities are going to have is they're going to have some sort of work order system. And if like the poll said at the beginning, the concerns around improving the find and fix process and speeding that up and making it more efficient, you've got to link those two bits of data together. All of those, that nightline analysis and your flow traces for your DMAs, more closely linking that information with your work orders so that you can get that sort of virtuous circle going, and a feedback loop is it's probably where I would start. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next question. How important is the change management piece in deploying a platform like this? I'm quite happy to take this one. I think it is quite often underestimated how important it is, to be honest with you. I think I do bang this drum quite a lot. I think you can have a great platform. It can do all the things that you want it to do, but if the people that need to use it don't buy into it, don't find it usable, it's not really going to get off the ground. So I think part of all of these kinds of projects really need to take into account and focus on who's going to be using this, how do they want to use it, what do they do at the minute, what would they like to do at the minute, and take all of that kind of stuff into the planning part of the process, so that you make sure that you don't just unveil some kind of brilliant Frankenstein's monster that nobody wants to actually to use. So I think it's very often underestimated how important it is, and also that not all the people get involved in the project who really need to be the ones who know what the day-to-day is, rather than it being some idea that somebody has. The next question, Matt, if I can pose that to you, is what are the biggest challenges you face when bringing this data together?
Biggest challenges. Well, a lot of them are quite common. If any of you have done this before, that like, yes, integrating data from lots of different sources and vendors is really hard. Lots of different formats. You'll spend a lot of your project time just defining all of those protocols. When does it come? How much of it? Like whether it's an API or some other transfer protocol. I'd say that actually one of the biggest challenges is not that. I mean, that is a big challenge, all that data integration, but it's keeping it there. It's keeping it integrated. That's actually really hard. These protocols tend to change. Procurement agreements tend to change. The quality of the data can tend to slip if you're not constantly looking at it and maintaining it. I mean, a concept for that would be like DMA operability, for example. You just start losing your flow information, and then you just don't know what's going on. So yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge is maintenance, like maintaining the data coming in, keeping not just keeping the uptime, but making sure that it's sort of valid, useful. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay. Another question is related to our view on trials and proof of concepts and how successful they can be. I don't know, Matt, if you want to try that one or if you want me to share some thoughts on that.
We could both share some thoughts.
Okay.
I guess. I mean, I've as I mentioned at the beginning, I've worked outside the UK a fair bit, and there is a notable difference between trials in some parts of the world and perhaps, let's say, the UK and perhaps some other markets. Things go a lot slower here than they do elsewhere. And once we get to the end of some of those trials, it tends to end there because the trial has been a trial and things haven't been considered for scaling a lot of the time. And I know this is widely known or widely held. It's not a surprise to anyone here. But Ruth, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. But I also sometimes think that proof of concepts and trials can get slightly out of control and sort of grow arms and legs. And I think it's really, really important to have a very clearly defined set of outcomes that you're looking for and stick to it. It's really difficult because it's great working with customers who get really excited about what you're doing and want to expand it, but you can quite easily sort of lose control of the beast if you let it sort of change. And I think it's really important to be quite strict about making sure that you get the sort of basics understood, agreed that it's doing, and before you then sort of expand it out into other sort of solutions. And it's a difficult thing to do because you feel like you're the person, the fun sponge at the party when you say no, we've got to stick rigidly to this and make sure that we get this over the line as it's just, it's doing what you want it to do, and then we can look at expanding it out. So I think that's quite an important one to keep track of. There's another question here. What is the best operating model to manage the data? Who should be involved to make efficient decisions? Oh, sorry, that just jumped.
I may have clicked the button there.
I don't know if it's disappeared out of my view now.
Yeah, what is the best operating model to manage the data? Who should be involved to make efficient decisions to streamline the process and repairs? Accepting this will be done to some degree already. Oh, wow. Yeah, so that's a bit of a minefield. The best operating model. So I think this is a journey any utility is going to go on where the best operating model is going to fit what you already have somehow. I've been at a few conferences over the past couple of weeks, and really one of the more important things is just making sure you've got buy-in in terms of digital transformation. So this is beyond leakage from the very top. And then you will be able to, you'll have the freedom and the room to build the right operating model if you've got that buy-in. If you're trying to run this just from the leakage department, it's going to be a lot harder, because you're trying to get data from all different parts of the business for your own needs for leakage. So that might not be directly answering the question, but that's where my mind has jumped to when you've asked it.
Yeah, I would add to that it might be the leakage team that are ultimately the ones who are going to want the outcomes, but you do need to get, IT, OT, anyone who sort of works in this space and has a sort of stake, I suppose, in this being set up, needs to be sort of on board and in agreement. You can want the end solution, but if it doesn't fit into your company's particular sort of, I guess, their roadmap and their vision, it may be more difficult to do that. I think that people being involved high up in the company also can help overcome some of the hurdles about, you are asking for information for lots of different people. Leakage might not be their priority, so you might not be at the top of their list to support. And therefore, it's important that if this is going to be something that's going to be successful, you do need to make sure that people can bring everybody along with you to make sure that you're getting the data when you need it, in the format you need it, or however that works. Okay. There is another one here. Oh, it's disappeared. I don't know what's happening to the questions. There was a question about AI. I don't know if
with the current tools available, will AI improve detecting leakage? Well, short answer is yes. I mean, it already does. You could look at any one of these different point solutions: acoustic, satellite technology, flow monitoring, alarm detection, and you could probably find a company or a solution that has already applied some degree of machine learning or AI to that data. So use cases where you have virtual ears for the acoustics, so you'll have tools that will be able to say that is a leak or that isn't a leak, or if it's a leak, it might be the big one or it might be a small one. Those tools already exist. There's certainly other use cases around trying to say from other, like, multiple different data sources that statistically this is likely to be a leak or not when you combine, say, flow and pressure together. You might be aware also that there are various sort of like field operations support tools that leverage AI. So, you stood out on your manhole cover in the field and you whip out your phone and you say, what's the current pressure here? And the tool will be able to go back into your utility system and say, well, the local pressure is this and the flow is this, and this is the nearest acoustic logger, and here are all of the manuals and all of the specifications of the logger if you want to change. So there are tools that are already entering the market or already being used that do some of these things. Where is it going to go beyond this? I think you're probably going to see, like, combining the data as the theme of this webinar. Like, you've got to start to combine the data before you can start to apply the artificial intelligence, the machine learning. So you can't do that if you've got all these data silos. If you want to find out that all your customer calls happen after a certain other event that you see in the data, so you can preempt it, then you need to have that data in one system first, so you can start running the machine learning. There's a lot of other problems you need to solve around probably data privacy and cybersecurity as well, but the combining data part is going to be the first step on the journey to fueling any sort of AI tools that you have. So there we go, a longer-winded answer.
Thank you. In response to a couple of other questions, one question that was asked at the start of the webinar is this going to be recorded? And the answer is yes, and you should all get a copy of it sent to you, a link of it, sorry. And anyone who registered should also automatically be sent that as well. But I think we might draw this to conclusion. Don't know if you've got anything else to say, Matt?
Thank you for listening. Yes. As I said to Ruth before the call, collectively, the number of people on this call probably listened to me more than, I don't know, my family have listened to me in the past year. So it's yeah, good to vent, as I suppose it is.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to second that and thank you all for your time. One question that was asked was if anyone needed specific information, who could they contact? Feel free to contact me. You can get me on LinkedIn or at ruth.clarke@xylem.com. I'm happy to field any questions and get the right person to speak to you. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much once again and hopefully see you at our next webinar.
Thank you all.